Hey, good morning once again, everyone, and welcome to the Finance-Auditing Committee meeting of January 23rd, 2025. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and if we could have a roll call, please.
Thank you. Good morning again. Starting with Director Dorsey, who's absent.
Yeah.
Dudacek. Dudacek.
Here.
Grosval. Absent. Hernandez.
Here.
Afton.
Here.
Verdoni.
Here.
Vice Chair Parr.
I hear.
Chair Rabbit.
Here.
And President Cochran,
Here.
who has moved over to the right now. Okay, thank you. We have a quorum and we are a committee of the whole. Also in the room, we have Directors Garbarino, Hill, Snyder, Terrio, and Thayer.
Great, thank you very much. We'll move on then to item number 3, which is ratification of previous actions of the Auditor Controller. The PFM report starts on page 7, and Monique is here. Welcome, Monique. It's good to see you. Happy New Year.
Good morning.
You can still say that.
Good morning and happy New Year.
You'll shed all the light on what's happening in Washington, D.C. in the next 4 years.
I will do my very best, and that's actually the bulk of my comments this morning. In terms of what we want to focus on, as we know, the year has turned over. We're in a very different environment as far as policy, what the world is expecting from the United States, what that means for interest rates, etc. A couple of things I want to highlight before I jump into those comments is I want to turn your attention to page 8 of the book and just showing the yield curve, because I think this tells a really interesting story about what has transpired. And I'm going to focus your attention on the 2-year Treasury chart at the beginning. This has been a very topsy-turvy last year for interest rates. You can see the tremendous amount of volatility in terms of rates moving drastically upwards over the last year and then down to, quite frankly, only end the year about exactly where they started. So the 2-year Treasury went from 424 at the end 425 at the end of 2023 to 424 at the end of 2024. Now, what this is reflective of is a drastic shift in expectations. We started the year expecting a lot of rate cuts to the federal funds overnight rate. We did get some rate cuts in 2024, but the expectation for the Fed continuing that policy has drastically shifted. A lot of what happened at the end of the year is there was concerns about what the new administration would do and how that would impact things like inflation, the trade environment, and what that would ultimately mean. And so I want to focus my talking points this morning on 4 key areas of policy uncertainty, because these are the areas that the Fed is going to be looking at, that investors are going to be looking at, and that ultimately will have an impact on the interest rate environment that we will be taking part in on behalf of the district. The first is taxes. I think the Trump administration has communicated fairly aggressively that they are in favor of lower taxes, both for corporations and higher income earners. Now, the lower tax policy is seen as a positive for growth, the theory being that if folks are paying less taxes, perhaps they're spending more and investing more, but that is going to be a net negative for the deficit. So that could lead to increased borrowing for the U.S. to cover its bills. Second area of policy uncertainty is, of course, the tariff policy. President Trump, during his campaign, and continues now that he's been inaugurated, to speak about tariffs as being a cornerstone of his policy. Now, the reality is there's a lot of uncertainty regarding the scale and scope of those tariffs. But from an economic policy perspective, the reality is that those tariffs will result in higher costs for goods and services, not only for folks who are importing goods for other places, but also the idea of retaliatory tariffs from some of our key trading partners. We've seen over the last couple of days, of course, the inauguration was earlier this week, that the size of those tariffs has been shifting. It started, I think, at one point we were talking about 60% for China. Last number I heard was 10%, but I only looked yesterday. We don't know what was said this morning or last night. So, the sands keep shifting, but I think the bottom line is that there is an expectation for some price jump associated with tariffs. I will also say that some of the Fed board members have been commenting about the tariff policy. I think there's a hope or an optimism that the policy perhaps will be transitory in nature, meaning that we may see some price increases, but perhaps it's a one-time price bump versus a persistent price increase. Again, time will tell. But I think we all should buckle in for some higher prices, which will put some pressure on inflation. Third, in terms of the big four policy areas, is immigration. The administration has been very, very clear that they are going to have a hostile immigration policy. Us being in California, you may have even heard reports of some migrant farm workers not showing up for work. That perhaps having an impact on the ability to farm crops, get things to market, which again is going to be an inflationary action. And so the impacts on the labor market will be adverse. We will see how that transpires. And last is the regulatory environment. We can expect that the administration will be looking to ease regulations both in the finance sector and perhaps in some other areas as well. Now, what does this all amount to? What this amounts to is an expectation that we will see further price pressure. And if you recall, the Fed had been raising interest rates aggressively to combat the pricing pressure that existed because of COVID and then the supply constraints that happened, after COVID. And so what does that mean? That means that we probably will not see interest rates dropping as much as we anticipated. The most recent Fed dot plot where they communicate their expectations actually showed perhaps 2 rate cuts this year if things don't go as badly in the inflation market as we may expect. And so what does that mean for the district? The bottom line is interest rates are going to be higher for longer. So we're going to see more attractive income opportunities, both for the district's overnight camps like camp, money that's held in bank accounts. You'll continue to earn higher income on those. Longer term investments like the 2-year treasury, where we have seen interest rates dropping, are going to stay elevated as long as the rate expectation stays where it is. And so for our part, we have continued to be consistent. I've come to you the last couple quarters talking about how our goal has been to lock in higher yields as they're available, to continue to diversify the portfolio, to hedge against certain risks in the corporate sector, and to seek good income opportunities when they're available. All of that has resulted in a very steady earnings capacity for the district's portfolio. If you turn to page 16 of the packet, you can see the portfolio pie chart at the top. I'll always say that, we like this to be fairly colorful so you can see the diversification. The portfolio yield is staying elevated. We have very active traders who continue to go out to the market to find good opportunities. And we expect the maturity distribution to continue to be matched well to your cash flow needs. And we work very closely with staff to ensure that you have the funds you need when you need them. So the environment may be uncertain. We're still trying to uncover what the administration will actually implement. But the investment fundamentals are sound. We're focusing on safety. We're focusing on liquidity. And we're ensuring that we're capturing good economic opportunities when they present themselves in the market. So I'll hold there for questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions for Monique? I think, this afternoon, as things changed this morning, we'll talk and adjust accordingly.
Look out for those tweets. That's my advice these days.
Look out for those.
Thank you.
I love when you talk about the expectations, because I think half the country has an expectation of one thing and the other half has an expectation of something else, and where it all moves forward, who knows. Director there.
Yes, I actually had a question. So when you talked about the fourth bullet, the regulatory environment, so the ease of the regulatory restrictions, how do you think that affects our portfolio specifically?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think where we've seen most of the discussion around the regulatory environment has been in the financial sector, actually. And just to give you a flavor for, what some of that can mean, we're talking about things like, how much collateral do banks have to post, to sort of shore up their reserves, things like that. If you take a look at page 16, which is the district's portfolio, you'll see that you have a fairly good, distribution of different corporate entities, some of which are financial institutions. Now, I will say that the banking sector has performed very, very well over the last few years. We're really happy with what's in the portfolio. We do pay attention to capital ratios, things that are going to impact the portfolio. We have a separate credit team that does a lot of research into this. We're not particularly concerned about the banks in your portfolio, but that is a sector that will see some of the, if we're looking at their side of the table, some of the benefits from that ease of regulation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Monique. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all the work. Appreciate it. We'll move on then with all the other actions of the auditor controller that are outlined in item number 3, and looking for a motion to approve. Actually, ask if there's any public comment first.
Thank you. We have no public comment on this item.
Okay. With that, can I get a motion from one of my colleagues?
So moved.
A second. We have a motion and a second, and we do voice votes today.
Yes.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Please say no. Hearing no opposition, that just passed unanimously for all present. Thank you very much. Quick act. There's no actions for item number 4, so we'll move on to item number 5, 5A actually. And Jennifer, it's good to see you. This is to authorize the filing of applications for Federal Transit Administration Formula Program and Surface Transportation Program funding for transit capital projects, and to commit the necessary local match for the projects and assure the completion of those same projects. And it's on pages 25, 26, and I'll turn it over to you, Jennifer.
Good morning, Chair Rabbit and members of the Finance Committee. The item before you on this one is a request for the general manager to submit and execute what we call the FTA formula funds. This is year 1 of year 2. It's $2.1 million in grant funds. You can see on page 26 where we're going to allocate it. It's for 17 paratransit cutaway replacements, as well as some operating costs for our ADA program. This will come back next year for programming the second year, but we want to get the authorization to submit and execute the grant funds for year 1. Happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions for Jennifer on this one? And is there any public comment on this?
No public comment on it.
And so we get 17 paratransit cutaways for these dollars, and I'll look for a motion to approve.
Second.
So a motion and a second, again on a voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Please say no. Hearing no opposition, that does pass unanimously as well. Thank you. Moving on then to item 5B, authorize filing of allocation request with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission for Regional Measure 3 capital funds for the San Rafael Transit Center Replacement Project. Back to you, Jennifer.
All right. So this one is for the general manager to submit RM3 capital funds. We're asking initially for the allocation of $500,000 out of the $2 million. The $1.5 million that's remaining, we will request after the final design of SRTC. If you're interested, you can see all the other future funds on page 29, which is the $62 million in future funds. But this one is so that we can get RM3 capital funds for SRTC for $500,000.
Great. Dennis?
Question?
Yeah, I just want to add, we want to thank the Transportation Authority of Marin When people voted for Regional Measure 3, it included a $30 million allocation for the Center Health Transit Center to pay for part of the cost. The Transportation Authority of Marin has some discretionary RM3 money they get to allocate, and we're very appreciative that they chose to allocate some of it to us. And so I just want to acknowledge that and thank the Transportation Authority of Marin, particularly those of you that may also be members of that body.
And I'll, one quick add on RM3. RM3, and as a one-day-old former MTC commissioner, I can tell you that the Regional Measure 3, the allocations were put out pre-COVID, before the bridge tolls went down, which creates obviously a little fiscal challenge for BATA in this case to the difference going forward. But still obligated to make sure that we committed or follow through on what was committed going forward. Just a quick note on that. Any questions on this one? And is there any public comment? Director Park?
I know it's not really our business, but I think now's the time to thank you for your service on MTC. No. It is. The assistance that you've given, the advocacy and the assistance that you've given to all of the areas that you sit on, and I know you're quite diverse in the boards that you sit on, but I think sometimes we forget how important that advocacy is, and I just want you to know from Smart and from my place on the board that we appreciate all that you've done for us.
I appreciate that.
We hope that carries on.
It was a lessons learned here at the bridge. In fact, going forward, the other 7 bridges are going to have a capital reserve fund like this bridge has had, because those bridges haven't had it, and that was a big surprise to me, especially when you have so much infrastructure in place. So right. I think it goes to show you that this place does things the right way, correctly, and we need to make sure we spread that across the entire base. So thank you, Barb. I appreciate that. Any other questions on this particular item? And there's no public comment?
We have no public comment on this item.
So with that, can I get a motion to approve this filing of the allocation request?
So moved. Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Again, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed, please say no. Hearing no opposition, that does pass unanimously with all present. Moving on then to authorize item 6, which is to authorize the setting of a public hearing to receive public comment on the proposed establishment of a pilot program for interagency no-cost or reduced-cost transfer credit on Golden Gate Transit Bus and Golden Gate Ferry. Ron Downing is here to tell us what this is all about, and that's on pages 31 to 34. Thanks, Ron.
Good morning, Chair Rappert, members of the committee. The item before you is to recommend to the board the setting of a public hearing for a new program coming forward for free and reduced cost transfers among the different transit operators in the Bay Area. As I've reported to you many times over the past 5 years, the region's transit operators have really stepped up with coordination and integration efforts to improve the experience for the customer. Our transfer programs differ by the various agencies that we connect with. Some we have a 50-cent credit with Muni. Some we have a much more generous fare credit, $2.25 for AC Transit local rides, for example. A whole myriad of agencies we do not have transfer credits with, including BART, some of the emerging agencies in the East Bay. Director Parr, we now have a connection with the Napa Vine bus at El Cerrito del Norte, but we do not have a transfer agreement with them. So I'm surprised you have a bus. This item would harmonize all of those transfer credits among the various operators in the region, including those that we currently do not have a transfer agreement with, to give the rider a local fare credit up to $2.75 for adults so that they can travel throughout the region. And this is a benefit because some of the longer regional fares on BART, on WIDA, on even Soul Trans Express bus can be $5 or $6 a fare. So this $2.75 credit will go a long way to improving the rider experience. This is all under the auspices of the region's Fare Coordination and Integration Study, which is now under MTC's Regional Network Management Council. And this is going to be available under the Clipper 2.0 program. MTC has asked all of the governing boards to ratify this new transfer credit so that they can embark on it. The initial date was set at April 1st. So the timeline for what we're looking at today is for setting up a public hearing on February 27th, engendering public comment, and coming back to the board in March for final action if we have any comment received from the public that causes us to change our proposal. That would meet the April 1st deadline. However, we have been aware that the Clipper 2 implementation dates have slipped a bit, and we will be ready for either April 1st or whenever it happens at a future date. The reimbursement from MTC, they have allocated $11 million across all 24 transit operators to reimburse us for any of the lost revenue that we had as a result of accepting these higher transfer rates across the region. And those funds will be allocated 18 months after the start of the pilot program, and then another reconciliation at 24 months. So again, that's a lot of detail for today, just giving you the background on how this got here today, and that we are setting a public hearing with your concurrence for February 27th at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I might add that what MTC is going to roll out region-wide is analogous to what we've had in Marin and Sonoma counties for a couple decades now. For a couple of decades, if you get off a Golden Gate Transit bus and get on a Petaluma City bus, Santa Rosa City bus, Marin Transit, or Sonoma County Transit, you did not have to pay the local fare. You had that transfer credit on Clipper. And going the other way, if you paid a local fare when you got on Golden Gate service, whether it's bus or ferry, you received the credit for the amount of that local fare. And we didn't have money changing hands. We just realized each agency gets going one way or the other, and it's worked seamlessly for us. But what's great about this is, as Ron said, it's all the other agencies, because we touch a lot of different places. We touch a lot of agencies. Thus far, we have this with, Marin Transit, Smart, Petaluma Transit, Santa Rosa City Bus, and Sonoma County Transit. To see this expanded throughout the whole region is something that staff, is very proud to participate in, and we strongly encourage you to set this public hearing.
And as the former chair of the regional network management, this was really part of that transit transformation. And there's a 10% set aside. And one could argue about MTC taking the cream off the top, but that was really dictated by what we heard in Sacramento to make sure that we were doing the right thing with the 27 different transit agencies that operate in the Bay Area. So I think that North Bay, quite honestly, and Golden Gate has always been ahead of the curve. Even with our mascots program is really the pilot for what should happen everywhere else. I think we're in a good place. And this is just another step in, I think, coordinating that. And I'm glad that, really glad actually the region is stepping up and putting the money into that, even though, obviously the funding will come out of other sources that we probably may or may not benefit from, the OBAG grants and those kind of things. So, with that, is there any public comment on this one?
We have no public comment on this item.
Is there any other questions? Yeah, Director Hill.
Yeah, I just want to mention that as Dennis knows, the seamless is coming. It's been taking a long time. It's probably going to take a lot of time more, but I think we will get to seamless not far away. Excellent.
Yeah, I think that already the schedule coordination, the fare integration, the transfer integration is really kind of those first steps. How far up that tree will go, well, remains to be seen, and whether there'll be 27 or something less in the future. But if you really could integrate it, maybe it doesn't matter as much. So do appreciate that. So again, we've taken public comment. Is there anyone willing to make a motion on this particular item?
So moved.
Second. A motion in a second, and again with a voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Please say no. Hearing no opposition, that does pass unanimously. Thank you, Ron. Moving on then to item 8, which is to receive the independent auditor's single audit report. So 7.
Authorizing
of public, but this one's for a different cause. So authorize setting a public hearing to receive public comment on a proposed increase in Larkspur to San Francisco special event fares on Golden Gate Ferry. Ron.
Good morning again. I'm still here. Yes. This is another public hearing item, would be also set for February 27th. It would be immediately following the public hearing on the Clipper free and reduced transfer item. So we're estimating that would be at 9:15 in the morning on the 27th. This is a proposed fare adjustment on our ferry special event service from Larkspur to the city for various events. It would cover both Giants and Chase Center events, as well as any concerts or any other miscellaneous events. So a little bit of background is this is a fare policy that would be, again, something that has to go through our public process, through our board process. We are proposing to adjust these fares because, quite frankly, they haven't been adjusted since 2022. And a little bit of background as to why we didn't adjust those fares. They were taken out separately from our 5-year fare program for 2 reasons. We were hoping to grow the ridership, and we did not have sufficient data to do the required Title VI analysis to implement such a fare change. The 2023 system-wide passenger survey that the board authorized that was conducted by CC&G that you had a report on a couple months ago, we now have that data, so we can move forward with the requisite Title VI analysis that can come with final adoption. The proposal for this public hearing is to have 3 one-year increases of 50 cents each, beginning with April 1st of this year, in time for the start of the Giants 2024 season, 2025 season. Sorry about that. So again, one of the considerations is that special event fares recover most of their costs from fares. And we had a banner year last year with the Giants, and we're able to recover about 96% of the costs from the fares. Recognizing that costs are going to continue to increase for various activities, including fuel, including labor adjustments, and things like that. The proposal before you represents about a 3% increase for the next 3 years on special event fares. So it's not terribly out of line with our other fare increases. It's in line with the 25-cent increases on our transit fares and 50-cent increases in bridge tolls. And so it's just an opportunity to bring this special event service back in line with our other programs as far as regular nominal increases on the service to keep ahead of costs. So following the public hearing on February 27th, again, the item would go back to the board of directors with any modifications we receive from public comments that change the staff recommendation, and also would be implemented on April 1st of 2025.
Any questions of Ron on this one?
I have one question.
Please go ahead.
Would the increases get 100% recovery? Or is it still?
We don't know. It depends on ridership. So we estimate, we try to be in the ballpark. Technically, we're supposed to be 100%. It's rare that we're 100%, to be honest, but we try to keep it in the ballpark. And so the board has that long-standing policy. As long as you have that policy, well, pun was intended. As long as you have that policy, we'll continue to try to set a fare that comes close to covering the cost of the service. Historically, your predecessors did not want bridge tolls to subsidize special event service. They thought that was, something that was more discretionary as opposed to people that have to go to school or have to go to work. And so that was the prior thought of your predecessors with respect to the policy. And so the item policy intends that policy, whether it's 100% or not, we don't have a crystal ball about how good the Giant season will be, or special events, depending on what musical acts play at Oracle, it'll also affect it. But last season was very encouraging ridership, especially in light of the Giant season.
The ridership was actually above 2019 levels last year. And quite frankly, if we're way off mark with this proposal, we'll come back to you to adjust it.
Great. Any other questions?
I have a question, yeah.
Please go ahead.
So are our special event fares supposed to be lower to encourage ridership? Is that the intent?
The opposite. The intent of the board is to cover 100% of the cost and not to have a toll subsidy or a very minimal or small toll subsidy. That is the current board policy.
Although, what's probably true, it's cheaper than driving and paying for parking and everything else. A much better way to go, I would imagine.
More relaxed.
Yeah. Anyone else have any questions on this one? In public comment?
No public comment on this item.
So with that, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Again, a voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Please say no. No opposition. That does pass unanimously with all present. Now we can move on to item number 8, which is to receive the independent auditor's single audit report for the year ending June 30th, 2024, as submitted by I. Bailey, LLP. And Jennifer, back to you.
I'm just going to do an introduction. Ahmad will come up in a minute, but Cody was hoping to be here, but I am in his stance because he is on baby watch. So we are hoping for good news for him soon. But he is, as usual, wanted to make sure that he recognized his accounting team. I will only do this once for Cody. I'm sure he wants to do a shout out to his accounting team for all the work. But I do want to recognize also Cody himself does a lot of work on these audits. So before you have the single audit report, we once again have an unmodified opinion. So it's good news. And I'm going to have Ahmad come up and present his findings.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the federal compliance audit. You receive federal funding from the Department of Transportation mainly, and the scope of the audit is to ensure that the expenses that you're charging to these grants are in compliance with the grant requirements. And so what we do is we audit these expenses, we sample these expenses, we make sure that they are in compliance with our grant requirements. This report, upon your approval, will be filed with the Federal Clearinghouse, and we issued a clean opinion. We had no adjustments or findings related to the compliance with federal requirements. And I'll be more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ahmad. Appreciate that. We just hope these federal dollars are going to continue to come. Is there any questions on the audit? Is there any public comment?
We have no public comment on this.
Quick shout out to Cody and the Baby Watch, and thanking him and the entire team for all the work, and thank you, Jennifer, for that. With that, I'll look for a motion to receive the independent auditor's single audit.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second, again on a voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please say no. Hearing no opposition, that does pass unanimously. Thank you so much for all your work. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Item 9, status report on our fiscal year 24-25 budget. Back to Jennifer.
Okay. So we have finished December, so we're 6 months in. For item 9 here on the status budget report, as you know, every month we go through and look at the budget compared to where we thought we are actual. On page 57, you'll see we started out with a $36 million deficit. We're working our way down because both our expenses and our revenues are doing better than the budget. So we'll keep a watch on that. I'm going to expand a little bit more on kind of some of the trends that we're seeing, but happy to answer any questions on item 9 in particular if you have that.
Anyone have any questions for Jennifer on this one? Seeing no questions. Thanks to all the departments, all the divisions for having that fiscal discipline, knowing the circumstances are, I think that's something that we always want to respect and say thank you as we go forward. So please go on, Jennifer.
All right. Item number 10 is your monthly review of each of our operations. Because it is the 6-month mark, just wanted to know what we have. If you look at page 67, you'll see the trends. This is the page I generally look at to see both on traffic and ridership and then the revenues that follow. Just a couple notes for our budget team, at least, has been an incoming. We think we should play the lottery since we never are really close on budget because we're always estimating. But for December, it was noted that we were 653 apart from what actually came in on bridge traffic. So we aren't normally that close, but they wanted to note that. But with that, as you're seeing, it's a big victory for us on the budget side. So, but you were seeing through the 6 months, we are running pretty flat from actual to actual. So bridge traffic is kind of settling into a trend as we're seeing. And with that on the revenue, you are seeing the increase in the tolls, given that the traffic is flat. For bus, I want to note they are on the rise, which is good. Overall, for half a year, they're at 4.4% on ridership. I will note on the revenue that there's a true up that happens on our Clipper program. So you will see a blip that doesn't match in December, that will follow through, and it'll actually do the same thing in Ferry. So for Clipper, they do an adjustment, twice a year. And so for December, it was, not in our favor. I'll say that they basically have a participant claim fund. And so some of that gets readjusted in true up. So you'll just see that in December. So that's why it doesn't match. And then for Ferry, you will see that they are also on the climb. They're 10% overall for ridership. And they are actually 6% up in revenue compared to last year with the increase they had. But they also were the benefits of this participant claim fund for Clipper. So twice a year, basically, Clipper goes through and just does a true up between all the different agencies. And a lot of it is because we have some of the e-fares up front and then how people ride and how it ends up settling. So it's really just an aging function. Happy to answer any questions on any of this information for the monthly.
Any questions for Jennifer on this? Not seeing any. Why don't you continue on to item number 11?
Okay, 11A, as you know, looks at, we have both November and December. So if you would turn to page 75, you'll see kind of what our consolidated revenues look like for the month and our expenses. And it looks like we're coming pretty even for revenues and expenses. I will note that when I looked at that, I was like, oh, that's a little unusual because you can see prior year to date, we're usually up 6 months. There was a timing and an adjustment on the close. So actually there's a $5 million swing. So really that would be similar to what you're seeing in the first column, the 5.7, you would probably be 5.8 if the adjustment had happened before the close. So you'll see that adjusted for next month. But that being said, we're always talking about the unrealized gains. As I say, Alice is always making money in the cloud. That's not actually cash in the bank, but what we actually have in the market. That's actually what you're seeing. So it is about a $5 million swing. So as I say, this is actually a reality, cash in the bank, but we're still positive. We're looking good for 6 months. As you know, we start going into more of a busy season in the spring. So for me, I think that's good news. Happy to answer any questions on this as well.
Any questions on this one? Why don't you just keep rolling?
11B is the 6 months for November and December for the capital programs. If you turn to page 94, you'll see kind of the up-to-date through December, what we look like. Of note, the SDS project was put into the bridge division, so it's 108 and as compared to 34 the month before. So that's all the major adjustment is the seismic change order in there. Happy also to answer any questions on this matter.
Any questions? I have one quick question, and maybe it's not so quick, but knowing that so the ARPA balance to date that we're expending this year is $19 million.
Right now, if you were to do it right now in 6 months.
And do we expect that to be the last tranche or the last fiscal year impacted by ARPA, and then as we go forward, our budget will be adjusted accordingly?
We're very appreciative of MTC's wisdom, follow through on the state legislature's wisdom. Senate Bill 125, Senate Bill 125 provided some flexibility and a little bit of new money to the various regional planning agencies throughout the state. MTC allocated funds over multiple years, and so we are the recipients of that. And so if we go negative this year, we'll be basically taking that out of reserves, but the next year MTC is going to give us some Senate Bill 125 money that'll allow us to basically backfill this year's shortfall and cover part of next year's shortfall. So the Senate Bill 125 allocation for MTC is instrumental in allowing us to, while being fiscally prudent, maintain service levels to meet customer demand. There's a couple of efforts underway to say, well, what happens after that? And after that, there may be some additional help from Sacramento. Senator Wiener has stated that he is interested in, prior to even the regional measure, getting another 1 or 2 years worth of money to help transit agencies with fiscal cliffs, as to give them a runway, if you wish, until voters can maybe consider and approve a regional measure in the Bay Area, and also to see what happens with downtown San Francisco's, the Phoenix rising up from the ashes again. And so there's some, helpful concepts being discussed in Sacramento, but there's a lot more to follow, and they're not baked in legislation yet. But the specific answer is, we'll negative this year, but we have Senate Bill 125 money. The intent of that is, don't swing the meat axe, be fiscally prudent, don't waste money, and at some point we'll see what we have to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. I just wonder strategically at what point do we, our actuals, are running so much beneath our budget, and I know originally that was important to have what we call the aspirational budgets show the difference.
From a technical level, right, you're gonna spend in your reserves, but we know because of the way MTC spread out the money, we're gonna pay ourselves back. So whatever deficit, which we're looking like it keeps coming down, so we're hoping to be in the teens per se, that'll come out of reserves. And then when we get the 30-some odd million from MTC next year, we're gonna pay ourselves back with whatever that ended up for the year, and then use the remaining for that coming fiscal year.
And so that next fiscal year we'll know before that next fiscal year ends what happens out of Sacramento. Yeah. So, the goal of staff is to help this board avoid any difficult decisions. And by the way we do that is we're very fiscally prudent. We're not running empty buses or empty ferry boats. Earlier it was brought up that we had 38 Larkspur trips. We cut it to 32. The reason why is we added those extra trips about 9 months ago, and the ridership didn't materialize, so we weren't going to continue it, even though SMART really wanted us to, because quite frankly, we don't have the money. And so we are being prudent in scaling our services to meet customer demand, and so that way, hopefully, as we survive the long tail of the pandemic, we'll avoid difficult decisions.
And that is very much appreciated. But I know that, again,
But
we've been dealing with it.
A year from now, we'll let you know where we are with Sacramento. A year from now, we'll know where we are in Sacramento. A year from now, we'll know whether or not we got relief. If we get relief, it'll be this legislative cycle, perhaps. If there's a regional measure that's authorized to go on the ballot, we'll know when it's going to go on and whether or not it includes us. It may not include us. But a lot of our fortune, so to speak, is tied to the fate of downtown San Francisco. We're in the mobility business. We provide mobility from San Francisco to Marin and Sonoma. To the extent people want to go there, we want to provide service. To the extent they go there, particularly in the cars, it gives us revenue. And so as downtown San Francisco bounces back, we'll have a better picture of what our revenue and demand for services looks like, and are they in balance or not.
And I do appreciate very much, our fiscal discipline. I also appreciate our ability to be so nimble. I think of all the transit agencies that I'm aware of, and sitting on all those regional things, trying to solve this problem, it seems like this district really just adapts to the dollars we have. If the ridership isn't there, you can, unfortunately, you don't run the empty bus or the empty ferry. But that hasn't been the case elsewhere, and it creates other pressures. So, with that, Director Mast.
Yeah, going back up the MTC state fiscal food chain, is any of that dependent on what might happen in D.C.?
The Senate Bill 125 money is not dependent upon D.C., so we're very fortunate that we can have a little deficit this year and not panic, knowing that we'll get money next year. But certainly there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of chaos with respect to a lot of other monies we get. And so we'll learn more about the fallout from the various executive orders in the coming months and how they affect us. One of his executive orders that was signed on Monday stated unequivocally there'll be no allocations of funds from the bipartisan infrastructure law. And now they've since, issued a clarification. Clarification's a little less muddy. But so I think it's going to take a little time to understand the full impacts. But it's important to note that, certainly on the capital side, federal funds is the bulk of how we pay for new ferry boats, how we buy new buses, how we build transit centers, how we retrofit the bridge. And so we're very much invested in what happens in Washington, D.C., as well as Sacramento, and as well at 375 Beale Street in San Francisco. So there's a fair amount of angst among not just us, but all of our sister agencies. I think it's shared angst. And on many policy fronts, where there's a lot of uncertainty right now in terms of things that we wish to accomplish, things that we think we need to accomplish, and how that'll all be effective.
Okay. Thank you.
Director.
I would expect once something's allocated, it can't be clawed back, but I know we got the 400 million, which is huge. Is there any chance that could be clawed back at all? I mean,
it's been a busy 6 weeks since the election. It got busier this week. The $400 million required a whole host of documents to be signed. You may recall, with much assistance from you and others, we received $149 million of new money from the state last year in spite of their record-setting deficit. So the board approved a financial plan for the seismic retrofit phase late last year. After the election, the draft funding agreements were modified in an attempt to obligate and draw down a little bit of the money. So the full funding grant agreement was fully executed last Thursday, and that's between Caltrans and Federal Highways. And then we have a subrecipient agreement between us and Caltrans, and that also has been executed. Our goal was to have that federal fund obligated. Obligation is something that gets you further down the path where you can't take it back, and then spending the money is the best. And so the funds are not yet currently obligated. The feds were able to, late Friday in their financial system, BEMIS in Washington, D.C., move money from all construction to a little bit of the pre-construction so we can obligate some of it and spend a little bit. Your staff, Jacob Brown, give him a big shout out. John Eberly, Chuck Vaughn have been working tirelessly. We have an invoice ready to submit for $1.5 million to spend some of the money. But there's a lot of steps. The executive order entitled Unleashing American Energy that came out on Monday was quite problematic in terms of what the Fed should do. Section, someone asked, 7 says, 7A, all agencies, this is a White House executive order, shall immediately pause the disbursement of funds appropriated through the Inflation Reduction Act and Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is the bipartisan infrastructure law, including but not limited to. So that means everything. Now, as you can imagine, that caused a lot of angst, not just here in California, but in Texas, Arkansas, Wyoming, and elsewhere, because that says all. So a day and a half later, the OMB issued a clarifying memo. The clarifying memo was not super clarifying, but MS 25-11 attempted to clarify it and say, well, it's that green stuff we don't want you giving money to. And then there's been some press stories today based on interviews with members of Congress from both parties, but more important, Republicans saying they don't believe it's the president's intent to hold up money for roads and bridges. But at this juncture, as of half hour ago, the money had not been obligated, we had not been reimbursed that first $1.5 million. So there's a lot of activity going on. I apologize if I haven't been quick in responding to emails on other topics, because $400 million is by far the most number one priority we have. If we were to lose that money, it would raise questions about the viability of our bus and ferry businesses, to be blunt. And so I don't think we're going to lose it, but until you have the money in hand, you never know. The infra money is much more available. Infra money is all general fund funded. So if you can pause allocations and not spend that money, then you could redirect that on paper for tax cuts. And we heard earlier there's a strong emphasis on that. The bipartisan infrastructure law has a lot of highway trust fund money in it. Not spending highway trust fund money does nothing for the national deficit, does nothing to fund tax cuts. But it is important to note the bipartisan infrastructure law was not 100% gas tax money. It had a significant chunk of general fund money also. But at this juncture, it does appear that bipartisan infrastructure law allocations for roads and bridges we're hearing will move forward, but as I said, as of a half hour ago, they have not. So hopefully tomorrow I'll have better news to report for you. Wow. So there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of chaos. But as you can imagine, your staff is very, very focused on the $400 million. Jennifer reminds Jacob every day, you got to give Dennis another update. And our other partners have been great. The Federal Highway Division Administrator for California, Alyssa, has been wonderful. The Federal Highway staff in D.C. And so there's a lot of effort to try to, answer questions. And this is just one of many policy areas where there's questions, but this is arguably the one that has the most significant financial impact on us. So we'll keep you posted.
Undoubtedly speaking for everyone, just saying thank you for staying on top of all that stuff. Obviously, vitally important. And yeah, I think chaos is going to be the theme for the next so many years. With that, any other? Well, actually, we'll move on to item 12. Or yeah. Item 12, Kelly. This is the review of the district's fiscal year 24-25 first quarterly report on judgments or settled claims. Page 103. There's a couple lists. It's good to see you, Kelly. Thank you.
You too. So this is the second quarter of the period ending December 30th, and we have 15 total claims that were settled. 9 were workers' comp and 6 were general liability. Now, take questions if you have any.
Anyone have any questions on anything on that list? This is nothing was extraordinary in terms of number.
It's extraordinary that there's 15.
Director Baston.
Yeah. What I think is extraordinary is that, except for one, all of these are relatively current. And I appreciate that, and I'm sure that employees and former employees are very thankful as well, and dragging on for years, if not decades. So thank you for that.
Right. You bring up a good point. We'd actually had a focus of resolving the really old book of business. And then most recently, about 6 months ago, I started focusing on the claims that were 3 to 5 years old because they consume about 46% of our open book. And so that's what you'll be seeing coming forward is the focus on that 3 to 5 year age claims.
Great. Anyone else? Kelly, thank you so much. Appreciate all the work. Back to Jennifer for the last couple of items. Get your steps in.
Yep.
Want to go on to 13, which is the review of the Auditor Controller's fiscal year 24-25 second quarterly report on authorized budget adjustments and budget transfers under the General Manager's authority.
This is really your quarterly report. I don't have any really comments unless there are questions. You will see them every quarter. So this is the just budget transfers under the GM's authority that we report.
Anyone have any questions regarding the list of those transfers? Seeing none, why don't you roll on to the next item, which is a review of the Auditor Controller's second quarterly report on procurement actions under the General Manager's authority.
Again, another quarterly report. This is the procurement actions of the General Manager's under the General Manager's authority that we report out on a quarterly basis. Again, I don't have anything to note, but if there are questions, happy to take them.
Any questions on this one? Is there any public comment for any of those last things we didn't call public comment for?
We have no public comment on items 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14.
Okay.
You see,
Yeah. And rolling into public comment overall. Well, let me state this. Before we continue on item 15 on the agenda, which is closed session, if there are no objections, I would like to accommodate the public and take item 16 public comment now instead of after closed session. Are there any objections to taking public comment now? Seeing none. Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to address this committee under item 16?
We do not have anyone in the room that submitted any cards, but I need to poll the public line because Justine did mention that some people jumped on and off that were new callers. So Justine, you can take this moment to poll your public line just to make sure.
Absolutely. Thank you. Is there anyone that's joined us that would like to speak this morning? Please use ** to unmute yourself and let me know. If you'd like to speak under public comment at the Finance-Auditing Committee meeting this morning, please use ** to unmute yourself and let me know. Okay, I'm not hearing anyone. Thank you.
I will do it. I just, like Dennis, I was chair of our board last year. And unbeknownst to me, I have a habit of saying when there's public comment, is there anyone else who would like to speak to this body? And I got a T-shirt saying that. So I told them it was a great night shirt. But you wrote it the right way. So I won't say that anymore because now it's like, anyway. So seeing no public comment, I want to thank everyone for their patience for our meetings. We'll be placing the public on hold for the duration of the closed session item. Return to closed session to join this meeting. And Kim, want to take us into closed session?
Of course, in the nick of time. Thank you, Charlie. At this time, the Finance Auditing Committee will go into closed session for a conference with legal counsel under Government Code 54956.9A for existing litigation. It's a matter called March versus GGB.
Thank you for your patience, everybody, while we are in closed session. Please remember to keep your own devices muted. Thanks.
.9A of the Government Code and gave its lawyer appropriate guidance as to how to handle the claim.
Perfect. And looking at my colleagues, could I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Hearing no opposition, we are adjourned.